That was the chairman's office. And then, but now it goes to the secretary. It goes for handling for people to share their waste and everything. And then connect with that, all of our staffs and everything like that. And then we open the call to public safety.
I am supportive of the bills on today's agenda, which are intended to improve the lives of our nation's veterans and their families. In accordance with committee rules, the subcommittee has contacted the Congressional Budget Office seeking informal preliminary cost estimates for each of the bills being considered this morning. Many of these preliminary scores are only a range of potential costs because the subcommittee has still not received official cost estimates on the bills from the Congressional Budget Office. None of the bills today include the offsets that will be necessary to move the bills forward. However, as we discuss what bills will go to the full committee markup and then the floor, we will add offsets to ensure that we are in accordance with House rules and that we are protecting the American taxpayer. I look forward to working with the ranking member and other members of the subcommittee to find offsets that have the least negative impact on our veterans. Of note, there are still multiple opportunities to improve and make necessary changes to these bills. The ranking member and I will continue working with our colleagues on the committee and any stakeholders that have feedback on these bills as we continue to work through the legislative process. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member for any opening remarks he may have.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Higgins. For organizing today's markup, I will aim to keep my comments brief so that we can quickly proceed considering the 8 bills on today's agenda. Among the legislation that will be considered are 2 bills I'm proud to co-sponsor, H.R. 6531, the Train VA Employees Act, and H.R. 6538, the VA Correct Compensation Act. I appreciate that both have been included in today's markup and look forward to advancing them in full committee. With that, Chair Higgins, I will yield back my time.
Thank you, Ranking Member Mervan. I now ask unanimous consent to consider the following bills en bloc: H.R. 6538, H.R. 6874, and H.R. 7342. Hearing no objections, so ordered. The clerk shall report the bills.
H.R. 6538, to amend Title 38.
The bills were circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. I ask that the reading of the bills be dispensed with and the bills be open to amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize Ranking Member Mervan for 5 minutes to speak on the en bloc.
Madam Chair, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I fully support the inclusion of VA Correct Compensation Act in this en bloc of bills. I look forward to this and other bills included in this en bloc advancing to the full committee. Thank you, and I yield back.
Do any other members wish to be recognized to discuss the en bloc? Mr. Rosendale, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Higgins, for holding this markup. I want to speak briefly on the en bloc and specifically my bill that's included, H.R. 6874, the Watching Over Electronic Benefits Act. As chairman of the Technology Modernization Subcommittee, it's been my priority to ensure vigorous oversight of the VA's enterprise technology modernization programs and projects. In the past couple of years, there have been several problems with the VA.gov that have impacted more than 120,000 veterans, and the VA has been slow to disclose them to Congress. Some of the errors are still not resolved and have negatively impacted veterans and their families. My bill, H.R. 6874, the Watching Over Electronic Benefits Act, would address these problems by requiring the VA to implement a process to actively monitor the VA.gov website for any adverse events that would impact the facilitation, maintenance, or receipt of the VA benefits. The legislation would ensure that the errors are identified and improve Congress's ability to conduct proper oversight. Additionally, my legislation would require a testing strategy by the VA to reduce the number of adverse events that happen by improving testing for each modification or software update to anything that might impact the facilitation, maintenance, or receipt of the benefits. This would get to the crux of the issue by preventing problems before they occur and harm veterans. Our Congress is planning to spend billions of dollars overseas this week, and yet we do not have a fully functional VA.gov website. As Congress, we must do better, and I urge support for my bill. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. No amendments were filed to these bills. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the passage of the bills included in the en bloc. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Ranking Member Mervan for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the following bills en bloc, H.R. 6538, H.R. 6874, and H.R. 7342 be reported favorably to the full committee.
There's a motion to favorably forward the bills included in the en bloc. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bills are favorably forwarded to the full committee. H.R. 7713, I now call upon H.R. 7713. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 7713, to amend Title 38 United States Code to require the
Text was
Secretary...
circulated in advance, so pursuant to committee rules, without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize General Bergman for 5 minutes to speak in support of H.R. 7713.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Under the VA Choice and Quality Employment Act, which we signed into law during the 115th Congress, VA is required to conduct annual performance plans for political employees, including its senior executive political appointees. Unfortunately, the law does not require VA to share these plans with Congress, and despite our general authority to conduct oversight over the VA, the department has not been forthcoming in providing these plans to the committee. The ones they have been willing to share with us have generally shown excellent performance despite the serious issues committee oversight has uncovered over the past year and a half. It seems likely that these plans were cherry-picked and not a representative sampling of employee performance as a whole. Without access to all of them, we just can't know. We also can't know how effective the performance plans are generally, whether they are in need of reform or how well VA is holding employees with poor performance or misconduct accountable. The VA Political Performance Disclosure Act takes the common sense step to require VA to share these performance plans for political appointees, and I repeat, political appointees within the Veterans Affairs Committee. Proper congressional oversight is critical to ensuring the VA is operating effectively, bad actors are being held accountable, and that our veterans are getting the best results possible. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 7713, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bergman. No amendments were filed. Are there any amendments? Do any other members wish to be recognized on H.R. 7713? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the passage of H.R. 7713. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Mr. Bergman for a motion.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 7713 to the full committee.
There's a motion to favorably forward H.R. 7713 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 7713 is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call upon H.R. 6452. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 6452, to amend Title 38 United States Code.
Text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6452, offered by Ms. Kiggins.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute be dispensed with and that it be considered base text for purposes of the markup. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of my amendment in the nature of a substitute, the H.R. 6452. This legislation, sponsored by Conference Chair Stefanik, would codify a veteran scam and fraud evasion officer within the Department of Veteran Affairs. Tragically, veterans are frequently the target of fraudsters and scammers who try to rob them of their livelihood. The Federal Trade Commission estimates that there were over 70,000 reports of veteran-related fraud in 2022. There are a number of organizations throughout the federal government and within the VA that work to monitor, report, and prevent fraud and scam attempts. Historically, these efforts have been limited because VA did not have a designated office responsible for coordinating these efforts. Last year, the VA began the process of establishing a veteran scam and fraud evasion office to better coordinate the communication, monitoring, reporting, and prevention efforts within the department. H.R. 6452 would codify a veteran scam and fraud evasion officer who would lead the office to ensure that this important work to protect veterans from fraud and scam attempts continues beyond this Congress and this administration. The officer would also be empowered to consolidate VA's scam and fraud prevention efforts, finding ways to not only improve VA service to veterans, but also make its operations more efficient to save the taxpayer money. I worked with Chairman Stefanik to make minor changes to the original bill text after hearing the VA's testimony at our legislative hearing last month. The amendment adds language to make it clear that the bill would not take scam and fraud evasion responsibilities away from the Office of Inspector General. Further, the language added requires VA to coordinate with tribal governments in its efforts. I would like to thank Chairwoman Stefanik for her continued work on behalf of veterans, and I encourage all members to support this amendment in the nature of a substitute. I yield back the balance of my time. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6452? No other amendments were filed. Are there any further amendments? Hearing none, the question now occurs on my amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6452. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Mr. Bergman for a motion.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 6452 to the full committee.
All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 6452 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call up H.R. 7734. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 7734, to amend Title 38 United States Code to
The text
require...
was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 7734, offered by Ms. Kiggins.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute be dispensed with and that it be considered base text for purposes of the markup. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment to H.R. 7734. This legislation, sponsored by Congressman Franklin, would require the Secretary to do two things in the event that a VA employee leaves the department while under investigation. First, the Secretary must complete the investigation. Second, the Secretary must make a notation in the employee's personnel file if the investigation results in adverse findings. Under current law, the Secretary is required in some cases to annotate adverse findings against an employee who leaves the department. However, the Secretary almost always terminates the investigation when the employee leaves the department. The consequences of this practice are problematic. Employees are free to return to the VA or another federal agency with an incomplete personnel file, thus allowing them to evade discipline. We do a great disservice to our veterans and the vast majority of employees of the VA who are excellent if we allow employees who are guilty of wrongdoing to escape any accountability. This committee has seen far too many instances of bad employees dodging accountability by leaving or retiring from the VA while under investigation. I worked with Congressman Franklin to incorporate the feedback this subcommittee received during our May legislative hearing into this bill. On behalf of Congressman Franklin, I want to extend our appreciation to the VA for their support of this legislation and their helpful suggestions. This amendment ensures that the bill is consistent with existing laws regarding personnel investigations and crucially ensures that these tools are usable for the department. By providing employees appeal rights and making clear that this bill applies to all employees, it would ensure that no VA employee has the option to avoid discipline by simply abdicating responsibility and leaving the department. I encourage all members to support this amendment in the nature of a substitute, and I yield back the balance of my time. Do any other members wish to be recognized on H.R. 7734? No other amendments were filed. Are there any further amendments? Hearing none, the question now occurs on my amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 7734. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Mr. Bergman for a motion.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that the subcommittee favorably forward H.R. 7734 to the full committee.
There's a motion to favorably forward H.R. 7734 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 7734 as amended is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call up H.R. 6531. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 6531, to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to develop a
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Representative Pappas Representative Mervan for 5 minutes to discuss H.R. 6531.
I support this bill.
That's great.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'm very concise
Very
today.
refreshing, thank you. Do any other members wish to be recognized? Anybody else wish to be recognized in HR 6531? Great, no amendments were filed. Are there any amendments? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the passage of HR 6531. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Mr. Mervan for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that H.R. 6531 be reported favorably to the full committee.
There's a motion to favorably forward H.R. 6531 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 6531 is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I now call up H.R. 6947. The clerk shall report the bill.
H.R. 6947, to establish within the Department of Veterans Affairs
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of H.R. 6947. This bill would codify the VA's commitment to history. Our society is often too quick to cancel history, and I applaud VA's commitment memorialized in this bill to preserve the items, stories, and leaders who have made this country and Virginia's 2nd District a place that I'm proud to represent. I realize that this bill is a score, and if this bill moves to the full committee, I'd certainly want to work with Chairman Turner to ensure VA's efforts are cost-effective and efficient. I encourage all members of the subcommittee to vote to move this bill to the full committee. Do any other members wish to be recognized on H.R. 6947?
Madam Chair.
I recognize Mr. Rosendale for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I strongly object to the legislation offered by Congressman Turner, H.R. 6497, the Veterans Affairs and Centennial Heritage Act of 2024. The legislation would require the VA to codify a history office to collect, preserve, and provide access to historical and cultural resources of the VA to the public. Our nation is over $34 trillion in debt, and the legislation is expected to cost $32 million over the 24 to 29 period. The legislation does not currently have a pay for, but we all know that if it were going to go to the full committee, the pay for would be extending the home loan fee. The median home price in Montana is $609,900. It can take years to even save up the 20% down payment for the cost of my constituents to buy their first home. The VA Home Loan Program helps veterans, service members, and eligible spouses become homeowners. There's no down payment required. Veterans receive competitive interest rates, and there is no need for private mortgage insurance. What I cannot support is legislation that would make it more expensive for veterans in Montana to buy a home so that we can establish a museum in Ohio. Veterans should not have to pay more for their houses so the bureaucracy in the VA can expand. I understand that the home loan fee is how the committee pays for most of its legislation that costs money, and I am willing to entertain ideas if the legislation directly supports veterans' health or benefits programs. I cannot in good conscience vote for something that does not directly help veterans and also increases costs for other veterans. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. No amendments were filed. Are there any amendments? Hearing none, the question now occurs on passage of H.R. 6947. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Ranking Member Mervan for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that H.R. 6947 be reported favorably to the full committee.
There's a motion to favorably forward H.R. 6947 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 6947 is favorably forwarded to the full committee. I ask unanimous consent that the committee staff be authorized to make technical, clerical, and conforming changes to the bills favorably forwarded today. Hearing no objections, so ordered. I thank the members for their attendance today, and the subcommittee is adjourned.